Hey there, viewers. Courtrooms are supposed to protect the vulnerable, but today that line was crossed in the worst way. Moments after a 14-year-old victim took the stand, Diddy snapped and attacked. The judge didn't wait. The sentence came down hard and fast. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. The girl in the blue shoes. They tell you not to get emotionally involved when you're a courtroom sketch artist. Not because it's unethical or anything like that, but because if you get too close, you stop being invisible. And we're supposed to be invisible. That's the job. You sit, you draw, you listen only enough to capture posture and tension, not truth, and then you disappear. At least, that's how it's always been for me. The courtroom that day was quieter than I've ever felt one. Not just quiet like people holding their breath. No, this was a kind of stillness that made my bones feel wrong, like the whole air was waiting for something to arrive. They'd cleared the gallery that morning. No press, no observers, no random interns or law clerks pretending they had reason to be there. Just the judge, a few federal agents, both legal teams, and me. I don't usually get called into sealed hearings, especially not on federal cases like this. But I got a last-minute request. They told me there needed to be a visual archive, not for public release, but internal purposes. I thought that was odd, but I've done worse under tighter deadlines. The room looked colder than usual, not in temperature, though it was freezing, but in energy. I know that sounds silly, but you do this job long enough and you learn to feel when a room wants to run. Nobody made eye contact, except the bailiff, who gave me a polite nod and then went right back to standing so straight he looked carved from wood. I sat in the far back left corner, next to the wall, my sketch pad on my lap, charcoal pencils tucked in my shirt sleeve like I always keep them. Then they brought her in. She didn't walk like a witness. She walked like someone who didn't think she had permission to be anywhere anymore. Small steps, eyes down, her knees knocked a little when she moved, like her legs didn't quite believe she should keep going. She wore a pale blue dress, something outdated, like it had been hanging in a closet for a while, not freshly bought. And then, the shoes. God, those shoes. They were the kind of thing you'd buy for a birthday party. Bright blue, sparkly, with a little ribbon bow on each toe, almost cartoonish. But not worn out. They were clean, but not new, like someone had wiped them down on the outside, trying to make them look untouched. And they didn't match the rest of her. The dress was wrinkled and old. Her hair was flat, pinned oddly, like someone had done it without really knowing how, but the shoes looked staged, as if they weren't hers at all. I drew them first before anything else. I never do that. I usually start with the face, then the posture, then the rest. But something about those shoes pulled me in. I shaded every angle of them, those ribbons that shimmer like fish scales in a tank light. I hadn't even looked up when I realized everyone was seated again, except Diddy. He didn't sit the way most defendants do. He wasn't hunched or casual or stoic. He sat upright, almost too still, like someone doing a performance of calm. His fingers tapped against the table, even though he wasn't holding anything. Just a soft tap, tap, tap that made the agent behind him glance at his hand once. And he wasn't blinking. I don't mean he blinked less than usual. I mean, he wasn't blinking at all, not once. I kept watching. I even drew him just to track it. Nothing. Eyelids stiff, like he was trying to hold them open for a reason. Then the questioning began. The prosecutor, female, middle-aged, the type who carried quiet authority, stood slowly and asked the girl her name. She gave only her first. Soft. You could barely hear it even in the silence. The judge leaned in and asked her to speak up. She repeated it, just a little louder. Then came the hard part. She was asked if she recognized the man sitting at the defense table. She nodded. Can you say his name for the record? She didn't want to. I don't blame her. After a moment, she finally said, Sean. Then, softer. Diddy. There was no gasp, no reaction. Everyone had already accepted the reality of who was in the room. That wasn't the shock. The shock came next, when she was asked to describe what happened during what they called the rehearsal weekend. She paused for a long time. Her hands gripped the sides of the seat. Then she began. Her voice was strange, not robotic but flattened, like she had practiced saying it without feeling anything. She said she'd been invited to a retreat to work with choreographers, that it was all explained as a mentorship thing, music education for gifted youth. She'd signed a form. Her guardian had signed too. But when she arrived, everything changed. There were masks, she said. They told me not to ask who was behind them. The prosecutor asked who told her that. She looked straight at Diddy and said, "He did." My pencil stopped. I stared down and realized I'd been drawing the girl's hands, and without noticing I'd pressed so hard the page had torn. Belly made me watch old dance videos, not like normal videos. VHS tapes. The sound was fuzzy. There were words at the bottom of the screen, but not in English. Just symbols. I was told to learn how to move like the girls in the tapes. The judge interrupted and asked for clarification on the tapes. The prosecutor motioned that the description could be submitted later. The girl went quiet again. A long stretch of nothing. I heard someone cough in the back. One of the marshals. That was the only sound. Then she added something, quietly. Being said, I had to learn how to dance like they did, because that's how they were chosen. But he still wasn't blinking. His attorney whispered something to him. He didn't respond, just kept staring straight at the girl. Then she said the part that chilled the air. He told me I wasn't ready until I stopped crying, that the others had passed their test. At that, Diddy stood. Not quickly, just stood. The defense attorney grabbed his sleeve, whispered sharply. One of the guards behind him stepped closer. I remember holding my breath. Then it happened. Diddy moved forward, just one step, but fast, like he'd been holding himself back for too long. A second later, 3 guards tackled him from behind. His chair tipped over. The girl shrieked. One of the court staff ran forward and pulled her back. He dropped my pencil. Everything became noise and shouting. But I only heard one thing. Just before they cuffed him, just before they dragged him out of the room, he looked at the girl, not at the court, not at the judge, and said something. Most people probably didn't catch it. It was half spoken, half growled, but I heard it, as clear as my own name. Psycho breaker. And then he was gone. The girl was shaking. The judge called for recess. The room emptied slowly, everyone pretending to be calm, but no one was calm. Not really. I looked down at my sketch pad and saw what I'd drawn. The blue shoes, the way they shimmered in the light, how they didn't fit the rest of her, like someone else had chosen them, like someone else had worn them before. And for the first time in my life, I felt like my drawing was the only true record of what just happened. Because the court transcript might be redacted, the tapes might go missing, the security footage might glitch. But those shoes, they were real. I saw them, and they don't lie. Chapter 2, no audio, no exit. I've worked in the federal courthouse for almost 12 years now. Never missed a shift. Never asked too many questions. That's what makes a good tech. You don't think about the faces, just the feeds. You make sure every camera is rolling, every mic is synced, every backup's running off the cloud and the isolated drive. You learn to watch without watching, to listen without hearing. That's the job. That's how you survive it. But this time, something didn't feel right. They called me in on a Sunday. Said it was urgent maintenance, off Hummers, no docket activity, just a quiet sweep of courtroom 3C. I thought it might be related to the incident earlier in the week, The thing nobody was officially talking about but everybody had heard about. Something about a minor on the stand and Diddy losing control. Rumors. I hadn't been in the room that day, but now, apparently, I was supposed to fix it. When I got to the security console, everything looked normal. Surface level anyway. I pulled up the event logs, thinking maybe there was a sync error, a firmware glitch, whatever. But when I went to the feed from the moment of the incident, nothing. All cameras showed red indicator lights for recording. All microphones registered open channels. But the audio? Dead. The video? Frozen. Every feed went blank for exactly 17 seconds. No error code, no corruption, just a clean, empty gap. I checked the server, same thing. Mainline, backup, cloud copy, encrypted fallback. All of them skipped the exact same window, like it had never happened. Not dropped frames, not scrambled data, just deleted. But deleted before it could even be recorded. That's when I remembered the thermal sensors. They're not part of the regular system. They're embedded in the wall lining. Small, passive, independent from the AV grid. Homeland installed them after that high-profile leak case a few years back. Most people don't know they exist. They don't record video, just motion-based heat signatures. If someone's hiding in a courtroom after hours or tampering with devices, those sensors light up like Christmas. I keyed in the command line, pulled the raw data from the day of the incident. It took a second to calibrate. Then I ran the thermal layer overlay on courtroom 3C during the missing 17 seconds. My stomach turned. It showed two bodies in the room, just like expected. Diddy at the defense table, the girl on the stand. The rest were behind the walls in the wings. But in the middle of the blackout, Diddy's signature didn't move. At all. And then, just behind the girl, another heat bloom appeared. Small, fast. It hovered for 2 seconds, right behind her shoulder, then disappeared like it had never been there. Not walked away, not faded out, just gone. I stared at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. It didn't make sense. There was no door where it appeared, no access point, no reflection or shadow registered by the standard cameras either. I ran the footage again, this time in frame by frame. Same result. 2 heat sources, then 3, then back to 2. I looked over my shoulder, half expecting someone to be watching me. The tech room was empty, dim, just the hum of old servers and the smell of hot plastic. But I swear the room felt colder now. That's when the door opened. Not a knock, not a slow creak, just a quiet click, and then a man I didn't recognize stepped inside. Black suit, no ID tag, not even a clipboard. Just a calm face and a badge I'd never seen before. Gold with an emblem I couldn't place. Some kind of federal rank, but not one I could name. "You found the thermal frames?" he asked like it was a known fact. I hesitated. "Yes, sir." He nodded like that settled something, walked over to the console, glanced at the data, and then back at me. "You don't report what the court redacts," he said. "You just delete what's mirrored." I blinked. I don't understand what that means." "You don't have to. Just log the timestamp, sign the confirmation, and wipe the local copies. The central servers have already been sanitized." That was when I saw the envelope in his hand. My name typed neatly on the front. He held it out. I opened it. Inside was a standard federal confidentiality waiver, one I'd signed a dozen times before. But the date at the top, it was dated 2 days before the attack ever happened. I looked up at him. "Is this a mistake?" He didn't answer, just pointed to the line at the bottom. Signature. I didn't sign. Not then. I told him I needed to consult with my supervisor, that I couldn't authorize a deletion without higher clearance. That was a bluff. I am the clearance." He smiled. "We already spoke with your supervisor. This is just a courtesy visit." He turned and left. He sat there alone, envelope open, screen still glowing with that brief, flickering third signature behind the girl. I rewound it again. That heat shape. It wasn't shaped like an adult. It was hunched, shoulders tight, almost like a child. But not quite. The proportions were wrong. The head was too large, the arms too long. I tried to shake it off, told myself it was a sensor glitch, misread data, but the temperature bloom was exact. It wasn't an error. For the first time in my career, I felt afraid to press save. I backed up the frames onto a private drive I keep in my locker. Just in case. No names, just a burned disk labeled Event 37452, Anomaly. I put it in a blank sleeve, tucked it behind a drawer of old power cords and forgotten manuals. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that badge, about the phrase, delete what's mirrored, and what it means when something exists in a reflection that never appeared in real time. The next morning, I got a system alert. One of my own private terminals, the one in my basement I use for testing debug sequences, had been accessed remotely. No IP address, no trace. The last command run? Wipe mirror/cycle_return foot. Audience. I didn't write that. No one should even know that terminal exists. Now I'm starting to wonder if this case, if it's even about Diddy anymore, or if he was just the catalyst, a trigger for something larger, older, something that hides in systems no one knows to look at. Or maybe I'm just tired. Maybe the servers fried something in my brain. Maybe there was no third signature. But the girl screamed for a reason. And when I close my eyes, I keep seeing her shoes and the way the heat bloom passed behind her. Not fast, not chaotic, but deliberate. Like it was looking for something. Or someone. I haven't touched the drive again. I don't plan to. But sometimes, when the hallway light flickers outside my apartment door, I wonder if the mirror there will catch something I won't. And I remember what he said, calm as day. You don't report what the court redacts, you just delete what's mirrored. I didn't delete it. I wonder if that was a mistake. Chapter 3, The Therapist's File. When they first assigned her to me, they didn't use her real name. They just referred to her as the witness. That's common in trauma protection cases, especially when minors are involved. But even so, there was something off about the way they said it. Like it wasn't just for anonymity. Like the word witness meant something different this time, something heavier. They brought her in during a rainy evening, face pale, wrapped in a gray wool blanket that hung past her knees. The moment she stepped into the room, I could tell she wasn't going to speak. Not that day. Not anytime soon. She wouldn't sit in the chair at first, just stood there, rocking slightly, like the ground beneath her was always shifting. I tried to make my voice gentle. I've worked with young victims before, many of them silent, many of them carrying far more than their bodies should have to. But this was different. The silence wasn't from fear. It wasn't defiance either. It was like her mouth had forgotten it ever had a purpose. I watched her scan the room. Once, slowly. Her eyes passed over the windows, the bookshelf, the coat rack. Then they stopped at the mirror behind my desk. It was small, decorative, something I'd picked up from a thrift store years ago. Just a framed little circle, nothing remarkable. But she stared at it like it was a person. I made a mental note of that. After her handler guided her to the chair and left us alone, I began the intake forms. Standard protocol even if she wouldn't respond. Name, age, guardian history, known trauma triggers. I filled in what I could based on the limited documents I was given. The file was thin. Much too thin for someone at the center of a federal assault hearing involving an individual as high-profile as Sean Combs. There were redacted lines everywhere, dates removed, witness statements sealed. Even her previous therapist's notes were replaced with a single sentence: evaluated. Non-verbal memory patterns consistent with deep ritual interference. Proceed with compliance lens. I'd never seen that term before, compliance lens. It wasn't in any diagnostic manual I'd read, and I've read them all. She didn't speak once during that first session. Not even when I offered her the coloring book, or asked simple yes/no questions she could answer with nods. But when I gave her space to be quiet, she pulled her backpack into her lap and started going through it. Slowly, carefully, like every zipper had meaning. That's when she brought out the notebook. It was small, maybe 6 inches wide, worn at the edges with a cover that looked handmade. Torn purple fabric taped over the original design. No title, just a single sticker in the corner. A white circle with 3 black dots in a triangle pattern. I almost didn't notice it at first. She placed it on the armrest between us, not offering it, but not hiding it either. When the session ended and she was escorted back to her safe housing, I sat there staring at the notebook. I wasn't supposed to open it. That's a boundary we're trained not to cross. But something in me, it wasn't curiosity. Not exactly. Something pulled, like the book was already open and waiting. Inside were pages of rough sketches, words in childish block letters, repetitions of strange names. The vocal coach, the candle woman, Ira boy, the Luke man, the recorder, poor twins. Dozens of names, all first names or titles, none familiar, no identifying details, just scrawled next to half-formed drawings of doors, masks, instruments. One page was nothing but repeated phrases. She said, "Rehearse until you don't feel it," over and over. On another, a single sentence written backward, "They taught me to forget forward." The most disturbing page, though, was near the end. It looked like a floor plan, a detailed sketch of a building, possibly a music studio labeled room by room, sound chamber, choreography hall, wash station, mirror suite. Beneath it, a second version of the same layout, but every room was reversed, flipped like a reflection. Same size, same structure, but reversed entrances and exits. One note at the bottom simply said, "Below is for what we can't say on top." In the middle of both floors was a symbol, a perfect circle, inside of which were 3 curved lines intersecting like a triskelion. I'd never seen it before, but something about it felt wrong. Not wrong like evil, wrong like old, like it had been drawn by someone who wasn't guessing. I scanned the symbol into my notes and sent it, discreetly, to a contact I'd worked with during a previous abuse ring investigation. Someone from a now-defunct interagency task force. He was one of the only ones who still answered my emails. A day later, I got a message back. Short, barely a sentence. "That's tied to Reset Pulse. Stop digging." That name, Reset Pulse. I hadn't heard it in years, but I remembered it vaguely. A sealed case from back in 2017. There were whispers in our circles that it had involved minors, music camps, supposedly therapeutic retreats that had federal funding but no oversight. The rumors said no formal charges were ever filed. The files were locked. The witnesses gone. Some relocated, some vanished. One entry in the classified docket database was marked with a strange comment. Cycle interrupted, await continuation. I didn't know what any of it meant, but I knew now that this girl, my girl, was part of something bigger than anyone had told me. That night, I couldn't sleep. My apartment was too quiet. Every little creak in the walls made me glance towards shadows, and I kept hearing the echo of that line from her notebook. They taught me to forget forward. What kind of system trains a child to misremember on purpose? The next morning, I received a package at my office. No return label. Inside was a blank CD. On it, a single file. No title, just a date. Cycle _3_return move. Haven't played it? I don't know if I ever will. But I keep thinking about that drawing. The mirrored floor plan, the circle with 3 lines, the girl who stared at my mirror like it wasn't a decoration but a window. I've started covering the mirrors in my apartment, not because I'm scared of what I'll see, but because I'm scared I'll see her. Still staring, still silent, wearing those same blue shoes that no one ever taught her to take off. And if this really is the continuation of something that was supposed to end 8 years ago, then I'm not her therapist. I'm just the next room in the plan. Chapter 4. The Man Who Wasn't Called. I wasn't surprised when they left me off the list. I saw my name on the early subpoenas, redacted just enough to give me plausible deniability, but they're all the same. Logistics consultant, external 2018, they called it. As if I just helped book hotels or buses. As if what we did at those retreats was ever that simple. But the call never came. No knock, no agents, no protective services, just silence. Which was worse? They don't want people like me in the courtroom. We're not loud enough. We're not noble enough to be whistleblowers. We're the ones who kept the trains running on time, made sure the permits cleared, ordered the lighting rigs, double-checked which vans had tinted glass. I was one of those men. Not proud of it, but honest about it. Back in 2018, I worked the Sky Room event. Officially, it was billed as a music retreat for cross-industry collaboration. A long weekend in a private estate in upstate New York, surrounded by dense trees and soundproofed fences. No public listings. The address only appeared once in a buried logistics file I helped create. In the books, it was coded as Studio R7 Sky Room. Just a vague reference to a non-existent division of an audio label no one could trip. Everyone signed contracts. Performers, dancers, staff, parents too, when kids were brought in. It wasn't framed as sketchy. We were told these were pre-professionals, kids from talent academies, teenagers with promise, learning how the industry worked. Some of them came with guardians, some arrived alone. Driven in by black SUVs rented through our compliance transport account. I remember her. Not her name. I never got it. We weren't supposed to use names. We used colors, outfits, sometimes initials if we had to track movement. But I remember the shoes, bright blue, dressy, glittering with tiny rhinestones, like something out of a fairy tale. The kind of thing you'd wear to a pageant, not to a concrete-floored rehearsal space beneath an unheated estate. I remember because someone pulled me aside and asked if she'd brought the wrong wardrobe. Those shoes weren't hers. They were part of the lookbook assigned to her group. Every outfit was logged by compliance stylists, a weird title even for our industry. The instructions were always strange. Pair shoes from list B with wardrobe from set 3. Hair neat, ribbons hidden. And never any cameras near the rehearsal zone unless pre-cleared. The basement wasn't on the architectural plans, not the public ones, but it was there. Unpainted walls, heavy insulation. No mirrors except for one long strip bolted above the dance rail. They called it the reflection line. Every dancer was told to face it before the session started. It wasn't just dance, we knew that, even if we didn't admit it. There were codes for everything. We used the word scripting to refer to what they were told to say after. They'd be handed laminated cards with phrases. He was very kind. I had a great time. I was learning to be a star. One of the chaperones called it affirmation looping. It sounded harmless until I realized it wasn't about making the girls feel better. It was about programming them to forget. We were told not to engage. Our job was schedules, timing, transport. But when you're around long enough, you see things. You feel patterns. I remember the night she came out of the rehearsal suite. Still in the blue shoes, hair a mess, shoulders trembling. She looked straight past me like I wasn't there. Then she bent down, took off one of the shoes, and left it on the ground. I tried to return it later, but one of the handlers took it from me, said she'd been moved to another compliance cycle. That phrase stuck with me. Moved, not released, not driven home, not even evaluated. Just transferred, like a file, like a shipment. I filed a report a few weeks later, anonymous. Sent it to an off-site abuse tip line that claimed to be FBI adjacent. I never heard back. No call, no follow-up, nothing. And maybe I told myself that was good, that it meant things were being handled. But I knew better. I left the industry not long after, told people I was burned out, too many late nights, too much nonsense. But really, it was that shoe, the image of it lying there, like someone had walked out of themselves and couldn't carry what they used to wear. I tried to forget. I really did. Then last week I saw the sketch. It wasn't even public. It was part of a leaked brief, an internal courtroom document passed through back channels. I recognized the style immediately. The charcoal rendering, the light on the dress, but most of all, the shoes. Blue, glittering, bows on the front. It was her, and I knew what that meant. She'd survived. She'd testified. She'd somehow made it out of the basement and into the courtroom. But when I saw her face in that sketch, I realized something else. We hadn't gotten out unchanged. There was something in the way her eyes were drawn, something I'd never seen in any survivor before. Not fear, not anger, not grief. Recognition, like she'd been waiting to be seen again. That night, I started writing it all down. My account. Everything I could remember. Dates, terms, routes. I was going to send it to the special investigator listed on the sealed docket. I didn't care anymore. My hands were shaking while I typed, but it felt right. Like this was my one chance to be something other than a shadow. Before I could hit send, there was a knock at my door. Just a single knock. Not urgent, not repeated. When I opened it, no one was there. Only a package. Small, brown paper, no return label. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a single shoe. 3 glittering, burnt around the edges, melted at the sole, and a note, handwritten in blocky childish letters. She remembered. Do you? I didn't sleep that night, or the next. I haven't opened my laptop since, haven't touched the report. The shoe sits on my desk, next to a folder of contracts I once called my career. I keep telling myself I should go to the authorities, but who would listen now? Who would believe the man who was never called? And maybe that's the point. Maybe they didn't call me because they knew I'd crack too early. Or maybe they didn't need to. Maybe my silence was part of the script from the start. Everyone saw it, but no one remembered, except her, and maybe me. Maybe that's why the shoe came back, sealed and sentenced. Some people think the courthouse is where justice happens. The truth is, it's where records happen. Names get typed, boxes get labeled, orders get filed away. Justice is just the word they put on the folder. The real work, the part no one sees, happens after the gavel drops. That's where I come in. I process sealed court materials. It's not glamorous. My office is 2 floors below ground, beneath the jury assembly room and the outdated archive library. No windows, just rows of fluorescent lights that flicker if you breathe too hard near the breaker. Most people never visit my floor. Most people don't even know it exists. That morning started like any other. Coffee, half cold, inbox full of stale directives, a docket list that included sealed assets from 3 narcotics cases and a weapons charge labeled sensitive. I was halfway through organizing sentencing packets for a smuggling conviction when the envelope arrived. No courier, no digital log, just an envelope, plain thick manila, placed directly on top of my keyboard. It had one line printed on the front in a sharp serif font. Non-audible sentencing. Subject 37,452-54. The number meant nothing to me at first. I'd seen dozens like it. Federal case identifiers usually don't mean anything until you hear them enough times. But the lack of a docket match bothered me. Every subject is supposed to be tied to a judgment entry. There was no verdict in our system, no jury report, no sentence duration, just that envelope. I opened it. Inside was a single folded page, handwritten, blue ink, steady penmanship, deliberate, not rushed like most notes I see from bailiffs or judges trying to get out the door before 5. It said, "Contain the conductor. All others resume rehearsal." No signature, no official seal, no timestamp. I stared at it for a while, thinking maybe it was metaphor, a judge's shorthand maybe for restricted confinement, conductor as a poetic stand-in for the defendant. But the more I read it, the less metaphorical it felt. It sounded like a direction, a cue, like the trial hadn't ended, like it had simply moved backstage. There was something else in the envelope. A disc, not plastic, not metal. It looked dense, smooth, reflective like glass, but cold to the touch. No grooves, no barcode, just a tiny inscription on the center ring. Psycho 4, feedback loop confirmed. I didn't know what that meant. At least, not yet. There was no port to read it, no label indicating format, but I keep an old universal drive reader at my desk, mostly for processing security tapes from older closed sessions. I slid the disc in. The screen flickered once, then black, then static. Then a file loaded. No title, just 7 seconds of sound, backward. The rush of reversed audio, harsh, rhythmic, then silence. And then the program closed itself. No error, no virus warning, just gone. I tried to eject the disk. The drive didn't respond. The disk stayed in. That's when I noticed the sound of my keyboard was gone. I tapped the spacebar. No click. The key moved, but it didn't make a sound. I pressed other keys. Same thing. The mouse, the drawer, my pen dropping onto the desk. Everything moved, but made no sound. I turned in my chair slowly and looked across the room at the mirror above the supply cabinet. It's just a cheap wall mirror, something a clerk before me probably hung up to feel less buried in this windowless tomb. But when I looked at it, something was off. I stood up. In the mirror, I was still sitting. No, worse, my reflection was just standing, but it wasn't matching my pace. And it was wearing the navy cardigan I'd worn last week, not a maroon one I had on now. I froze. The reflection smiled. I didn't. I took a shaky breath and stepped back to my desk. The envelope still sat there, the paper now slightly curling at the edges, like it had been exposed to heat. I read the line again. Contain the conductor. All others resume rehearsal. It wasn't sentencing language. It was staging language. As if the courtroom was just a set, the verdict a line in a play. And Diddy wasn't convicted, he was contained, isolated, held not to face justice but to stop something, to prevent a disruption in something older, more rehearsed. I opened our secure login portal, tried to search the case docket again. 37,452.54. The system froze, then reset. When it came back, the docket number was gone, completely erased from the Federal Registry. No judge listed, no defendant, no hearings, nothing. But a new line had been added to my processing queue. Feedback loop entry confirmed. Clerk status, observer. Mirror compliance, pending. I don't know what that means. I've never seen that category before. I checked our manual database, even pulled out the dusty binders we keep from the 90s in case of digital blackout. No such term. I tried to contact my supervisor. Call didn't go through. Tried to leave the building. My access badge flashed green, then red. Elevator refused to go past my floor. I waited. Nothing moved. Like I'd been pulled off the schedule. Later that day, someone knocked on the archive room door. Not forceful, just once. I didn't answer. When I finally opened it, no one was there. Only a small note taped to the handle. Pending reflection. The mirror across the room was still shimmering, like heat rising off pavement, but only in the reflection. The real air was still cold. I took the disc out of the drive. Finally, it slid free. I placed it back in the envelope. I wrote nothing on the folder, logged nothing. I placed it in box 147B next to case files labeled only deferred echo cases and recordings sealed rounds 1-3. The box wasn't on our shelves last week, but it fits now. I still haven't heard the sound of my keyboard return. I still haven't seen my reflection move right again. And I keep remembering that phrase, resume rehearsal. What if this wasn't the end of the trial? What if it was just the end of the audience? And now, we're all backstage. Chapter 6, The Final Transport. They don't tell you why certain inmates get moved. They just hand you a packet, scan your badge, and tell you to follow the route exactly as listed. No questions, no deviations, no clocks. The clocks are the first thing you notice, actually. How they all stop working once you're inside the chute tier. That morning, I was assigned what they called a single unit transfer. That means one inmate, no escort, internal shift. The file was thin. No destination block, just a location code scrawled in permanent marker. D4/subcore/SHU. I've worked inmate transfers for over 6 years, across MDC, Florence, Atlanta Federal. I've seen heavyweights go down screaming, seen cartel guys piss themselves before the cuffs even locked. But I've never been given a file without a printed route sheet. Never had a supervisor drop an envelope on my desk that simply said, instructions for 37,452.54, do not mirror. That last line stopped me cold. It wasn't a joke. In transport lingo, mirror usually means redundant transfer. One officer shadows another for high-risk runs. But this was something else. The envelope had been hand-sealed. No digital scan, no return signature. And that number, 37,452.54. I'd heard it before, floating around the administrative wing quietly, as if saying it too loudly would invite something in. I picked up the inmate at 400. No cuffs, no leg irons. Not standard, but the form had red ink across it. Presence verified. Do not restrain. When I walked into the holding chamber, he was already standing, waiting, like he knew I'd come alone. He wore the standard orange jumpsuit, but he held himself like someone in a tailored suit. Posture too good, too still. "Mr. Combs," I said. He smiled, didn't speak. I gestured to the corridor. "We're moving." He nodded once, then began humming. Soft, low. First, I didn't register the tune, just thought it was nerves. But as we walked, it hit me. There was something old in the melody, like something I'd heard as a kid, a lullaby maybe, but off. The kind where the rhythm stutters in the wrong places, where the last note hangs longer than it should. I asked him to stop. He didn't. I kept walking. We passed through Section D, the old medical unit turned observation tier. No inmates housed there anymore, not after the last incident. Some said the lights down there never turned off. Some said they never turned on. Then we reached the elevator. This one was marked differently. No button panel inside, just a keycard slot and a single vertical row of unlabeled squares. I inserted the access card provided in the envelope. The elevator door closed. It began to descend and didn't stop. I counted the seconds. 1 floor, 2, then 3. But it kept going. By floor 6, the fluorescent ceiling bulb began to flicker. By floor 10, it was pitch dark, except for the dim emergency glow near the floor rail. Diddy kept humming. I started to feel the air change, like something pressing in. Not hotter, not colder, just closer. At what I guessed was floor 12 or 13, the elevator shuddered to a stop. Door opened to black. There was no sound, no wind, no mechanical hum of fans or pipes, just stillness. I reached for my flashlight. It flickered but held. I swept the beam left to right. Ahead, a hallway, bare concrete, wet in places, like something had recently been dragged through. I turned to look at him. He smiled again, then walked ahead of me. I didn't stop him. We reached the end of the hallway, a holding cell, no bars, just a solid steel door, dented slightly in the middle. I scanned the code etched on the handle. SHU, Delta Tier / Confined Presence Active. I unlocked it. He walked in without hesitation. The door sealed behind him with a hiss. I stood there, watching him through the narrow view slot. He didn't sit. He didn't pace. He just turned to face the far wall and continued humming. I returned to the elevator, hit the panel once. It rose immediately, no delay, as if it knew I was done. When I got back to the surface, the clocks had started again. The hallway buzzed like normal. The day staff was arriving. I made my way to the monitor room. Something in me needed to see the feed, needed proof I hadn't imagined it. I accessed the SHU cam. There he was. Still standing. Still humming. Then something happened. He turned toward the corner of the cell, stared into the blank steel wall, and smiled. He raised one hand and tapped it against the surface. Once, twice, 3 times. The camera flickered. I rewound the footage, slow motion, frame by frame. Here's where it gets impossible. In the recording, he never moved. Not once. His hand didn't rise. No taps. But the wall, God help me, the wall bent. Not caved, not dented, bent, like heat bending air, like reality folding in. Then the feed cut to static. I logged it, not in the main system, that'd get flagged. I logged it in the anomaly report binder, the one we keep locked in the gray cabinet with no serial number. The last line I wrote, Subject 37,452 to 54 successfully transferred. Visual distortion observed at 4:31. Reflection compliance pending. Later that night, as I got home and peeled off my uniform, I heard humming through the vent. That same tune. That stuttering, broken lullaby. I turned on all the lights. I checked every mirror in the apartment. One of them didn't show me standing there, and showed the holding cell and the wall that was no longer straight. Chapter 7. The room without a verdict. When they called me back, I assumed it was a clerical error. I'd already finished my assignment weeks ago. Real-time interpretation for the sealed sessions during the federal trial involving Sean Combs. After the incident with the minor, I'd filed my linguistic report, reviewed the audio logs, and returned my temporary clearance badge. That should have been it. But the message I received wasn't through the usual channels. It didn't come through court services or federal scheduling. It came on a note folded in thirds left on the front seat of my car. Plain, cream paper, just my name, time, and a floor code I'd never seen before. Interpreter recall, RM7D, operator reference, 37004, 450-54. No judge signature, no docket number, just that case identifier again. The one everyone had started whispering around the courthouse. The one I'd translated during the sessions, but had never seen associated with an actual conviction. I showed up anyway. Part curiosity, part compulsion. I don't know why exactly, but something about it felt unfinished. Like I'd closed a book, only to hear one more page turn behind me. A plainclothes official met me in the north wing and walked me without a word to an elevator that went only one direction, down. The lights got dimmer the farther we went. Not burned out, just dimmer, like they were deliberately turned low to keep your eyes soft. I stopped asking questions by the time we passed the second sublevel. He didn't answer them anyway. We arrived at a door marked Interpretation Archive, Subdocket Playback Lab. He opened it for me and gestured for me to go in alone. Inside was a single chair, a projection terminal, a stack of labeled mini-discs in what looked like chronological order, except none of the years matched. 1997, 2023, 1984, 2015. Some even had no date, just symbols, curved lines inside circles. Same one I'd seen scribbled in the girl's notebook sketch weeks ago, the triskelion. A woman's voice, calm and mechanical, came through a ceiling speaker. You are being brought in to clarify a linguistic anomaly from case subject 37,452 through 54. Statement under review. Cycle breaker. I waited for the footage to begin. A file loaded. Session playback, no verbal record. Observer class 3. It was the courtroom again, the same room I'd stood in weeks before, but different. Empty, except for 2 chairs. One was for a child, the other adult-sized. A girl sat in the first. Same blue dress, same glittering shoes. But she was older, maybe 17, long hair braided now. She smiled calmly, looked straight at the camera. The timestamp in the corner read, 2015, Cycle 3. I blinked. That wasn't possible. The footage I interpreted was from this year, 2025. The girl on the stand then was no older than 14. And yet, here she was again. Same outfit, same voice, old. In the video, she opened her mouth and said something, but the sound played backward. Not reversed audio. Reversed meaning. The intonation, the phrasing, it was all backward structure. Like a conversation read from end to beginning. A language I'd heard once during trauma deprogramming training, but dismissed as an error of cognition. Now it felt intentional, performed. Then came the phrase. They themselves, he taught me to forget forward, he remembered backward. The video glitched. The girl was gone. Diddy sat alone in the chair, hands folded. No visible emotion. Then the phrase again, but in his voice. Cycle breaker. Except it wasn't him. Not really. It was a loop of her voice through his mouth. The video cut. The screen returned to the file queue. The next one was labeled Verdict Playback, Operator Compliant. I selected it. This time it was a still image, no movement. The courtroom frozen. Everyone in their places. Prosecutor, judge, bailiff, but they were statues. The only movement came from me. I was standing at the interpreter podium. speaking, but no sound came out. Instead, a transcript began to scroll across the screen in real time, matching my lips. And the words, they weren't English. They weren't any language I'd studied in my 20-year career. But I was saying them. Lines of glyphs, strange looping structures, curved and jagged strokes, repeating in spirals. And beneath the transcript, a caption appeared. Operator compliant, verdict cycle stable. I stopped the playback. My palms were sweating. My throat was dry. The ceiling light above the terminal flickered twice, then steadied. I turned to leave. The door wouldn't open. I knocked, waited. Nothing. Then the terminal screen flashed again. The document loaded. Courtroom transcript session echo. Interpreter review. I scrolled down to the witness section. The girl's name was still redacted. But under Court Translator, the signature read, Vince, calm. I've stared. It wasn't possible. I never signed that document. He did. He signed in my name. I closed the file. Finally, the door clicked open behind me. When I stepped back into the hallway, the official who'd escorted me was gone. No one stood in the corridor. I took the elevator back up, alone. When I reached ground level, the clerk at the reception desk looked up and blinked at me like I wasn't supposed to be there. You weren't scheduled for anything today, she said. I nodded. Just a clarification request. She looked down. There's no record of that. You're not on the docket anymore. It left. But I keep thinking about what I saw. That older version of the girl. The phrase, cycle break. What if she wasn't a whistleblower? What if she wasn't even a witness? What if she was a loop? A repeating image. A planted cycle meant to trigger something in him. Or in us. And what if I helped translate her into the system? What if that was always my role? I opened my personal notebook the next morning. At the top of the first page, in handwriting that looks like mine, but isn't, I found a line. You've already spoken, you're just translating now. And beneath it, Diddy's name, but written in my hand. Chapter 8, The Mirror Trial. I don't know if I was there. That's the part that bothers me, not whether it was real. Real doesn't matter anymore. Just whether I sat in the courtroom or stood in the hallway or read about it later. Or maybe I heard it through someone else's voice, then carried it like it happened to me. These days, the difference feels like a technicality. But I remember, if that word even means anything, is that I woke up one morning and found a file on my desk, manila folder, crisp edges, no dust, like it hadn't been there yesterday, but also like it had always been there. The label read, Trial, Version 2, Witness Reversal. No court seal, no initials, just those words. Inside were 6 pages, thick parchment paper, not the kind we use anymore. They smelled faintly of ash. Burnt edges, but clean cuts. Each page was a drawing. Not sketches, illustrations. Meticulous. Cold. The first was of a girl sitting on a witness stand. Same blue shoes. Same vacant eyes. The bow on one of the shoes had come loose, like it had been tied by someone with shaking hands. The second image was of the courtroom. But something was off. The furniture was reversed. The judge's bench was where the defense table should have been. The flag hung upside down. And in the gallery seats there were no people, just mirrors, angled to face the witness box. Page 3 showed Diddy, or something, wearing his face, smiling, but the smile was too wide, the kind that doesn't end at the mouth. His hands were folded in prayer, or maybe restraint. On the table in front of him sat a toy cassette recorder. Play was pressed. The fourth image was the judge, but there was no face, just a smear of gray where the features should have been. Robes draped perfectly, hands visible, but no identity. In the background, The wall bore a phrase written backward. Resume rehearsal? The fifth illustration was of me. That's the part I can't shake. It was me seated near the back, sketch pad open, pen in hand. Not interpreting, not guarding, not filing, just watching. My expression was blank. My own face looked out of place, like someone had copied it from memory, not reference. I don't draw. I don't own a sketch pad. Not that I remember. The last page was an overhead shot, grainy, like it had been pulled from a surveillance cam. It showed the courtroom, completely empty, except for the girl. She sat alone at the witness stand, humming, quiet, still. Same dress, same shoes. One of them glowing faintly under the flickering light. The file didn't come with instructions. No return address. I checked the hallway security footage from that day. Nothing. No one entered. No one delivered anything. But from that moment on, things started to unravel. I stopped dreaming. Or maybe I kept dreaming, but the dreams felt like real memories. I'd wake up knowing how the court smelled during closing statements. I'd taste the metallic air of the shoot here. I'd see the exact angle the mirror bent when Diddy tapped the wall 3 times. These weren't imagined details. They were records. I started seeing that phrase everywhere. Witness reversal, on elevator displays, in email spam, once even on the barcode scanner at the grocery store. Brief flashes, gone before I could point them out. The courthouse doesn't list that case anymore. No docket, no notes. Just a blank where his name used to be. But the building still feels it. Some rooms hum a little too long after you leave them. Some doors lock in both directions, even without a latch. I went back once, told the front clerk I needed access to Archive 3C for a file audit. She frowned. That courtroom's sealed. Permanently? She nodded. Doesn't exist anymore. I didn't argue. But before I left, she handed me a key card without looking up. I think this is yours, she said. I took it. No label, just a white card with a single black circle in the center. When I got home that night, my bathroom mirror was fogged over. I hadn't showered. I hadn't used the sink. But there it was, an outline of a child's handprint. Small, smudged, left by something that wanted me to look closer. That's when I finally understood what the trial was. It wasn't about punishment. It wasn't about evidence or justice or even testimony. It was about containment, not of the accused, but of the memory, because what they did to her, what they taught her to remember, wasn't supposed to get out. She wasn't just a victim. She was a recording, a loop. And once she spoke, the system had to seal her inside it, turn the courtroom into a chamber, the trial into a mirror, the sentence into a sound that keeps playing, even when no one is listening. They say Diddy was sentenced, but not jailed. They say he vanished into the system. But I think that's wrong. I think he's still in the room, still humming, still listening for her voice, or maybe waiting for someone else to pick up where she left off. I pulled out the file again yesterday, checked the last page, the overhead surveillance image. The girl is still sitting there. Only now she's turned to face the camera. Smiling. In the shoe? It's gone. Just an empty print where it used to be. They said he attacked her, but she was the one who remembered. And remembering was the sentence.